Okay, good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and it's our announced starting time for this town meeting information session. My name is Paul Cohen. I'm town manager here in the town of Chelmsford. And first, I want to thank you for coming out on this dark evening to obtain information in advance of Monday's town meeting. I hope you've all picked up copies of the Finance Committee report and recommendations, the green book as you come in the hall, and there's some on the back table if you didn't. And also we have a copy of the handouts that you'll see at tonight's session. The purpose of the information session is to provide information to you in advance of the meeting to help you prepare for the sessions next week. It's not a mini town meeting or a trial run, so this is not a debate session or a forum for discourse. It's really a question to provide information to you to help you prepare and to answer any questions that you may have to help you prepare. We'll try to adhere to that. I know that's sometimes a fine line between what's information and what's advocacy, but we'll do the best that we can. Again, by our town charter and bylaws, we have a regularly scheduled spring and a regularly scheduled fall town meeting. Here it's under our bylaws the third Monday in October, the 20th this year, so we're on the doorstep of that. And we have a warrant that's rather lengthy for fall town meeting compared to recent years. There are 35 articles on the warrant. Again, they're all detailed in the booklet and they're detailed in the presentation materials. About half of those are zoning articles, and most of the zoning articles are a bundle, and Chris LaValle, who's the chair of the planning board, will come up and present those materials to you and obviously answer questions that you may have in the questions regarding the zoning bundle that's being presented to you. And the reason they're often put in the bundle is because they're of like mind, and it's a way to hopefully synchronize how the articles get considered, because zoning bylaw in particular is very complex, and you have use tables, you have definitions and so forth, and you really need to do it, if you're going to do it holistically and not in sections, because then it would be complex and perhaps sometimes ununderstandable or unenforceable. What we anticipate, just for your planning purposes, how our bylaws read as town meeting goes on Monday evening, the third Monday in October, as I mentioned, and then by our bylaws, unless otherwise voted by the town meeting, it continues on Thursdays and Mondays till completion. We anticipate this will be a two-session town meeting. We will start at the beginning of the warrant and with a little bit of a consent agenda of 4 articles of general articles, and then we'll go as far as we can on the first night. It's the financial articles and general articles are not that complex, and I hope you'll see that this evening. There aren't a lot of slides, and there isn't a lot of complexity, as I said, to the requests. And then the plan is, because of this bundle of this new zoning district, that will begin and be taken up first item of business on the second session on Thursday evening. And the reason for that is you don't want to get started and then have to adjourn the meeting and then try to regroup and pick up where you left off or cut off debate and so forth. So that's the plan that's been discussed with the moderator. But again, town meeting, sort of through the moderator, sort of dictates our flow of the meeting. So that's what we anticipate as we go into town meeting. So now to get into the details of the warrant. As is customary at every town meeting, we hear reports and officers of town committees at every fall and spring town meeting. This time we have 4 items that we're going to discuss. The first one is the pet cemetery article. You may recall at the spring town meeting, the town meeting asked the administration and select board to look into the request to establish a pet cemetery in town, so there'll be a report on that. Again, these are reports, not actionable items. Our Public Works Director, Christine Clancy, will provide a report to town meeting on our capital infrastructure process, basically sort of reporting to you the work that's been done with the votes that you've taken, notably on the town's infrastructure. And then our Finance Director, John Souza, who you'll hear from shortly this evening, he'll provide a 5-year financial forecast, which again will be presented on Monday evening. And then finally, I'll come back and just give you an overview, which you'll see tonight, of how we're allocating the cash, free cash at this town meeting. So that way, as you're considering the articles, you can see hopefully how it comes together. And as I mentioned, here is the financial overview. Our fiscal year, if you may recall, goes July 1 to June 30th. So June 30th closes, all the bills get in by early July. The town accountant by mid-August submits to the Department of Revenue the town's balance sheet for the close of the fiscal year. And then the state reviews that and approves that and then certifies what's called free cash, or your undesignated fund balance. This year it was $4.9 million. It's about 3% of the town's operating budget, as you can see on the slide. We also currently have a general stabilization fund, which is basically the town's cash reserves. As you can see, that's $16.75 million, which is roughly just under 10% of the town's budget, which is sort of the target of where we want to be as we go through our not only to adhere to our town's financial policies of between 5 and 10%, but also we're coming into a very challenging economic period. Obviously there's uncertainty about the economy, and we're seeing the impacts of inflation, and then obviously what's the uncertainty with state and federal funding. So that's where we are. So at this meeting, there's no request to put any additional funds into the stabilization fund. However, we are trying to address, with the funding articles, the town's infrastructure needs. You'll see in this town meeting, again, funding for roofs and roadways. We have capital needs that are significant in the town's infrastructure. We're a community of 37,000 people. We have 30 buildings. We have 190 miles of roads. We run 5 fire stations with apparatus and so forth. And we have a capital plan committee. And in looking at that capital plan as we're going forward, we have significant investments that are ahead of us in terms of roofs, particularly on school buildings, such as the McCarthy School, the high school, Harrington School, and then coming in behind that are going to be fire apparatus. We'll be looking in 3 years for a new ladder truck that's estimated at $2.7 million, and then engine replacements. Basically, they have a 20-year life cycle, and we're coming into a new round. So that's the focus of our infrastructure backlog, because we want to really stay on top of it as we move forward. And also, and I'll put this in as a commercial, the town is also in the process of consideration of a new middle school. A week from tonight at 7 o'clock, at the same time we were meeting tonight, over at the Chelmsford Elks will be the first community input forum for the Parker Middle School project process. And so again, all public is invited to attend to that and provide input. There'll be a second information session in November, and a third information session, public input session in December. And that will set the town up to make its first initial submission to the Massachusetts School Building Authority on the configuration of grades and enrollment and size for a potential middle school project, of which this town meeting has funded the feasibility study for a vote that will probably be taken in early of 2027, which sadly is less than a year and a half from now as time moves on. So that's sort of the context of what we're doing as a community. And so this is the breakdown of the articles. Again, you can read it. I'm not going to read it to you, but as I mentioned, the big highlights on there are $1 million put into road and sidewalk construction and $2.5 million to do the McCarthy Middle School roof project, the second phase of funding for that project. And you'll get details of that as we go through the town meeting. Next item is a consent agenda. As I mentioned, each session of this town meeting will have a consent agenda. The second one you'll see later this evening will be a consent agenda for the zoning articles. This is for the following 4 warrant articles, 2 of which are no action. Articles 5 and 35 will be no action, so that's why they're bundled into a consent, meaning the town just votes them as a bundle. And then 2 and 3, which are early articles, and you'll hear very soon, are ministerial articles that are traditional at town meeting, and so therefore we by our past experience, we bring them as a bundle. Obviously, they can be debated, discussed, even separated, but we took 4 of the 35 and did that, again, 2 of them with no action. So once that is acted upon, we'll now go to Article 2, which is funding for the Cemetery Improvement and Development Fund. And I'm going to turn the podium over to our Finance Director, John Souza, who, in addition to his experience as a finance director, has cemetery experience, and so he can best speak to this article, and he'll also speak to the following article this evening. So, John, I'll turn the podium to you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good evening, everyone. Under Article 2, the Cemetery Commission is seeking a transfer of $65,000 from their Sale of Graves and Lots account to their Improvement and Development Fund. And as shown in the slides, the $65,000 would be used to purchase and install another niche wall at Pine Ridge Cemetery. And for those of you that may be unfamiliar with that, it's an above-ground structure where you can purchase a small space for the placement of cremated remains. And we have two town cemeteries where those are located, and that's Pine Ridge Cemetery and Fairview Cemetery in North Chelmsford. So that's Article 2. And then under Article 3, we're seeking a transfer of $195,833 from free cash to our Sewer Construction Stabilization Fund. And what this represents is this is the amount of interest earnings on our sewer capital improvement monies and our sewer betterment funds that we earn during fiscal year 25. So under state law, interest has to be deposited into the general fund, and then it flows to free cash when we close out the fiscal year on June 30th. In order for the town to dedicate these monies towards our sewer construction debt service in future years, a town meeting vote is needed. And this is something that many of you have probably seen in the past. And this allows the town to take those interest earnings and deposit them into the Sewer Construction Stabilization Fund so that we can use it to pay future years' debt service for the sewer project. And this is part of our long-term, this is part of our long-term financial plan to pay sewer debt service through fiscal year 31. And so that's basically the essence of Article 3.
Thank you, John. And again, just put your hand up or wave or whatever if you have a question you want us to stop or re-explain something or answer something. Again, those two are consent agenda. They're pretty straightforward articles, as I mentioned. Article 4 is a funding for a collective bargaining agreement. This one is with the public safety dispatchers, as you can see on the screen, and it's the amount of $42,485. Under our bylaws, we cannot pre-fund budgets in anticipation of contract labor agreements. So as we've done in previous town meetings, when we reach an agreement, we have it approved by the select board and by the bargaining unit, and then it's presented for town meeting for ratification. The funding of the first year of a multi-year contract ratifies the contract, the financial terms. This, just like the other agreements that you've seen previously, which were the library at the last town meeting, and then we had the 3 police unions previously funded at spring town meeting. This is a 3-year bargaining agreement. You can see the wage schedule increases are basically at the market of we have data that compares us to comparable towns. And there's some minor changes like a 50 cent per hour in the shift differential for those who work second and third shift, and a change in the longevity pay schedule, which hadn't been updated in a decade, as well as converting it to a percentage going forward. And then minor language changes in terms of shift bidding and vacation scheduling and so forth. So that's what's there. Once this is ratified, the town will only have one bargaining contract unresolved across all of its school and general department operations. So teachers are done, the school custodians, the paraprofessionals, police, dispatch, library. The only outstanding group right now is the firefighters collective bargaining agreement, and that is now in a mediation stage. So it will come back at a future town meeting at some point. Article 5, as I said, is no action. It was a placeholder in case we had to do something to the town's operating budget. The good news that we heard today from the state is making no changes in its revenue assumptions for the state budget that began on July 1 of this year. Why that's important to us is we receive about 14.5% of our budget in local aid from the state in terms of Chapter 70 educational funding as well as unrestricted general government aid. And so again, there have been discussions about the fiscal uncertainty and would the state revise of revenue estimates, which could then impact our revenue source. But we had a placeholder article, but the good news is at this point there's no change in what's really only our fourth month of the state's operating budget as well as our operating budget. So that's good news. Yes? Right, exactly, in 4 months. But also there's no need to, the state has decided there's no need to revise their budget, and therefore there's nothing material that changed from what we voted back in April. Article 6 is the first of, as I said, capital investment articles. This is to invest $1 million of free cash into roadway and sidewalk construction. As a slide, it's busy, and you'll have it and look at it, but basically we've traditionally have come back in recent years at fall town meeting to put funding into our roadways, which is the most important one of our infrastructure in the community in terms of who it's used by in the community. Basically, it's virtually everybody uses it. It's obviously got a safety component because of the travel on the roadways. Unfortunately, road construction, like everything else, has become very costly. This year, finally, after a decade, the state increased the amount of gas tax money that came to the towns in what we call Chapter 90. So we as you noted, it increased by $500,000 to $1.7 million we received from the state through the gas tax. In our capital plan, we have $800,000 in roadway and sidewalk, and this now will put us up to about $3.5 million. Sounds like a lot of money, but we've got 190 miles of existing roadway in the community, and we have 48 miles of existing sidewalks and 12 miles of proposed sidewalks in the planning stage. And so the DPW is just finishing this construction season. They'll actually be doing some paving this Saturday as part of the work, so you still see them out there. The plants run generally till mid-November, and this is basically to get us going. And this is the preliminary list of roads that would be paved in next construction calendar season, which is 2026. So that's what, yes, question there, and then I'll go to you. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yes.
When I looked it up, it wasn't on the fixed list.
Yes.
But now I see it on this list.
Mm-hmm.
So has the fixed list been updated?
Yes. The list gets updated every year, and sometimes when they're out there, they find things that they didn't foresee. Meaning, let me take a moment. There's two ways that you redo a roadway. You basically do what they call a mill and overlay, which is when you see them, they grind up the pavement that's on there, and then you ride over it afterwards, and it's kind of rough, and then they come back and put another overlay on top of it. Or in some cases, it's full reconstruction, where they basically down to the dirt and have to reconstruct it. And that's the balance that you have. And there's also things you can do to extend the life of roadways, like crack sealing and so forth. And so what the DPW does is they survey all 190 miles of their roadway annually, and as you can imagine, the town's roadways don't wear evenly. You know, obviously more heavily traveled roadways like Groton Road that's in front of us this evening are taking a lot more traffic, higher speeds, and such activity that is different than a side road or a cul-de-sac. And also the speeds are different on Groton Road than they would be on a cul-de-sac and so forth. So sometimes it's not just a thing of, oh, this road looks like terrible, this one is better. That's why you'll see work get done on some roads more frequently than others. It's no different than if you drive on Interstate 495 and you see them repaving the roads every 3 or 4 years. It's because of the use and because of the safety factor. So yes, they go out there every year, reassess the roadways, and then revise the list. And so that's how the work gets done by the town. So this is the tentative plan right now. It'll get examined again after pothole season next spring. Could change slightly, but generally, you know, we pretty much have a good handle. Believe it or not, there's actually a rating score of the town's roadway conditions, and we're making inroads, but it's a big challenge. So yes, you've got a question, then I'll go to you, Lawrence. Go ahead. Yeah, it is. It's on the town's website. If you go to DPW under highway, you'll see the assessment, roadway assessment. Yes, Lawrence?
It's my understanding that some roads that come through town, like Wilson Road or state roads, is not the maintainer of that road.
Right. Yes, there are state roadways, there are local roadways, and then there are private roadways. The state roadways generally align themselves with numbered routes, but not exclusively and not entirely. So there are portions of Route 110. Littleton Road is state road, but Chelmsford Street from the town center to Alpine Lane is town, but from Alpine Lane to Golden Cove is state, and then from Golden Cove to the town line is state. And then similarly, it's a hodgepodge of roadways, but generally the numbered roads would generally tend to generally be state roads. And the problem is we can ask the state, but we have no ability to compel the state to pave state roadways. Yes. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, there is. And generally what they try to do is they try to construct the sidewalks if they're adding or redoing with the paving of the roadway because of efficiencies when you're out there. And that's generally how it works. The challenge with 48 miles of sidewalk is you not only have to maintain them and keep them in good condition, you also have to do snow and ice removal in the wintertime, which is a challenge because in Chelmsford, the town is solely responsible for sidewalk. And the challenge with doing the sidewalks is the town's first obligation is to get the roads cleared because of public safety. You want to get police, fire, medical, everybody out there. And then for a long duration storm, when you wrap that up and you do the parking lots and schools and everything for the town, then you got to send some of the crews out on the sidewalk plows to do the sidewalks. And that's a time-consuming process. What the town is focused on in its planning efforts and construction efforts is sidewalks to schools because many people, who live close to schools walk to schools, and that generally tends to be the focus. And then there's also a sidewalk plan where they would tend to connect areas or build areas of sidewalk where needed. For example, Main Street is under design now for reconstruction and redesign. There's sidewalks needed on Main Street, so when that project gets designed, it will be designed for roadway and sidewalk construction to expand the sidewalks on Main Street. The challenge with Main Street is it's a long roadway, so it's not only costly, we then have to look at the maintenance that takes place after that in terms of, as I said, ongoing maintenance as well as snow and ice removal. Okay. Yes, Audrey. Mm-hmm. 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 That's correct. Roughly. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, there's no 25-year plan on sidewalks. No. Right. Yeah. 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 It's usage and conditions. The challenge that the town has is, again, we're constrained by Proposition 2.5, which limits us to 2.5%, and also the state doesn't allow the town to impose local excise taxes. There's been some discussion the last time the state tried to raise the excise tax on gasoline was over a decade ago, and immediately got repealed by the voters at the next state election, and so they won't touch it. Nor will they give communities the ability to impose a local roads tax similar to what we have a local meals tax. So no, there is no plan. What we're trying to do, again, with the supplemental investments is to stay, basically stay even and not fall further behind. But no, we just don't have the means to do it. And when John gives us 5-year financial forecast, you'll understand why, because we're projecting non-level service going forward. Okay. All right, Article 7, again, continues on the issue of roadways, and this is for as entitled, Design for Roadway Construction from Technology Drive to Richardson Road and Vinyl Square. These are state-owned roads, but how the state system works is, in order for you to get considered and advanced on the state roadway system, you've got to provide what's called the 25% design, basically a feasibility design, to then get placed on the Transportation Improvement Project, which is funded by our local regional planning organization to advance. And that's what these two projects are. We're seeking $300,000 to fund the designs for the reconstruction of Route 3A, which is North Road, from Technology Drive to Richardson Road, and then the portion of Route 3A, which is basically Vinyl Square in the center. As I said, those are state-owned roads. The concern at North Road at Technology Drive to Richardson Road is really the intersection of Richardson Road and Princeton Street. That is a horrible intersection, and it meets the state criteria for a traffic signal. And so we are seeking to advance that. In fact, we had a meeting about 2 weeks ago virtually with the state officials. That is sort of our number one priority as a community, because we've had terrible accidents there, and it's basically real challenging to try to take a left out of Richardson Road onto Princeton Street most hours of the day. And then the second one is the Vinyl Square reconfiguration, which has been ongoing now for about 7+ years, is to redesign the intersection at Vinyl Square. Same thing, if you come into Vinyl Square from Middlesex Street and Princeton Street, the idea is to reconfigure that to make it a T intersection as opposed to this Y intersection or V intersection that sort of is like, when can the person go and so forth. The desire is to put a traffic signal onto the intersection as you come in from Middlesex into Vinyl Square. We're not quite sure it meets the state's warrant, and thus far it hasn't to do that work, but we still want to tee off the intersection because it's safer. And then improve the design, because right now that intersection, as you can imagine, doesn't meet the state standards. You've got cars parked in the traffic intersection with traffic signals and so forth. So there's going to be changes to parking and so forth in that whole section. So that's what we're trying to do with this article. And so you can see, it's this whole question of 25% design. Back in July, we held a public input session on that project. Heard from a number of the residents in Meadowbrook and everywhere else about the challenges there before us. And again, we're hoping by this spring to have a design hearing on the Vinyl Square intersection to advance these. These are multi-million-dollar projects that are going to be state funded, because as we talked about the challenges, towns don't have the ability to fund those redesign projects. They're literally $3 and $4 million. So for example, when you saw the work that took place at Billerica Road and Riverneck Road by the cemetery in the center of town, that was funded by the state. The one at Concord Road, at Bedford Road is another one that was funded by the state. This follows up on that list, because the state basically is responsible for the construction of those. And again, the map just shows you the areas that we're talking about. You can see the highlighted yellow from Technology Drive to Richardson Road. There's been some discussion of sidewalks. We're not quite sure that's going to happen at this preliminary stage. And then Vinyl Square, as I mentioned earlier, has been an ongoing effort in that area. So that's what's requested under this article. The next article, yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes. Yep. No, we believe that that's all it would take at this point in time, that should get us to the 25% design stage. Yep. Next article, Article 8, is for the police station emergency power supply. We're seeking $100,000 to replace the Emergency power supply system at the police station. Obviously, it goes without saying the importance of having uninterruptible power supply. Anybody who lives in Chelmsford knows the power fluctuations and outages that we have. The police station is actually at the end of one of the lines of National Grid, but it's also critical that it run 24/7. The system that's in that building is at the end of its useful life. The police station is now, well over 20 years old. We've had failures in the last couple of years, and they're getting, as you can see, we spent approximately $25,000 the past year doing emergency repairs. So we basically want to replace that emergency power supply system at the police station under this article. Yes? Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, what we do is we notify the utilities and the water districts and so forth, in advance of resurfacing, because when we pave a road, we don't want to have to open it up for 5 years minimum. So we notify them in advance saying, get out there, do your work. We'll even hold off if you're not quite finished, so that way we're not ripping up roads that were just put in. No, no. Yes, Badri. Yes. Yes. When we replace the roof, because the roof is very empty, but the roof is also over 20 years old. And so we don't want to be putting solar on a roof that we're going to be replacing in the next few years. And in fact, you'll hear about this when we get to the roof article, because basically what we're finding is we're working on the Byam School roof right now, and we'll be planning to do the McCarthy roof. The solar panels on those buildings are over 10 years old, and they have a zero residual value. And so we have to replace them. So we don't want to be putting solar on a roof like this and then coming back. So yes. Yep. 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 Right. That will be within, it's on our approved plan. Yep. Yeah, they just finished resurfacing the parking lot. You'll see photos of that on Monday night. You would. Yeah, you could do the structures, but we can about that later. Article 9 is for this room. It's to transfer $45,000 at the suggestion of Bob Schneider, who is the impetus and did the acoustical study. The acoustics in this room need to be improved. In fact, the reason they're doing the school public community input session, the next 3, they're doing it at the Elks because they didn't want to use this room because the acoustics are really challenging in this room. So the idea is to spend $45,000 to add sound absorption in the ceiling and on that back wall to improve the acoustics in this room. As you can see, this was done by a study back almost a year ago now, back in January, and we hope to have this work done prior to coming back to Springtown meeting. And we hope that it'll improve not only for town meeting, but more importantly for the day-to-day users of this facility, the seniors and others who use this hall. Because as you can see, if you look around, there really is not much sound absorption in this room with the tile, the wood roof, the bare walls, and really half drapes. So the idea is to install the sound absorption to improve the acoustics in much needed in this room. So that's the request under this article. Yes? Oh, no, you're right. The problem is it's the echoing and the pitching. But yes, no, that's all been, and Bob can speak to that. Yeah. Oh, I don't know what color it'll be. Yeah, I think they showed this as an illustrative to show you what it would look like. No, it's to show the illustration. Otherwise, it'd be like somebody got slimed. Yeah, that's not what we're trying to do. It's more to show in the picture like what's changing. Yeah, yeah, it won't be green. Okay, all right. Article 10, again, comes back to infrastructure and in this case, switchgear in the Chelmsford Public Schools. And most notably, it's going to be in the Southborough School and the high school. We just completed the work over in the McCarthy School. And you say, well, gee, why is switchgear important and so forth? Again, the electrical components of these buildings are original, in some cases 50 to 70 years old. If the switch gear goes down to the building, it's going to be a while before you get that replaced. It's no different than if you lose, a major piece of electrical equipment. The utilities aren't holding the stuff in inventory. It's going to take time. And what we're trying to do is get ahead of this to maintain the electricity in the buildings. The most critical one was McCarthy, because that was our oldest school. It was built in '59. Reason we're using Southrow is next summer they're going to be doing the roof at Southrow as well as the interior acoustical ceilings. And so that building's going to be basically torn apart. So we want to do the electrical there. And then the other critical one in terms of size and mass is the high school. And so the 200, will get us there to work on this next summer, because you really can't be doing this when the kids are in session. This will give us time to spec the work, bid it, award it, and have it scheduled and the equipment arrive in time for next summer. Yes? Switchgear is your electrical components. It's basically the transformation of the power that comes into the building through your circuitry. The best thing in your house would be your electrical panel and so forth. But you can imagine the complexity of those components in a building as large as the high school or the McCarthy School. It's basically your whole transformation of power inside your building. So so you really got to go in and gut it out. And unlike a plumbing leak where you get in over the weekend and do it, electrical switchgear, it's challenging. So that's what's going on there. Article 11, this is sort of an anomaly article, and it really is a procedural article. We're seeking to transfer $408,963 to the dollar from free cash to the public schools' payment of out-of-district special education tuitions. And here's a lot of text. Here's what happened. Basically back in May of 2024, the state provided an advance payment to school districts of its special education circuit breaker, which is basically the reimbursement for kids who go out of district for both transportation and travel for special education programs. The state allows you to carry that balance forward for 1 year, and we traditionally have done that. When the school department closed out their books this year, they carried that money forward, thinking it was FY25 funding because it was an advance payment, not an additional payment, but an advance payment for 25 that was provided technically in fiscal year 24. So the town accountant submits the balance sheet to the state, and they say, no. Those monies have to be released and turned to the town's general fund because the year is expired. The problem with that is the school department factored those funds into their budget for this current school year. So it's sort of a procedural way of restoring the school budget to what it was originally intended and funded. So what would have happened had it been what we thought it was is we would have had $408,000 less in free cash, and the money would have been held in the circuit breaker reserve. Instead, the 408 got released to free cash, and now we're taking that from free cash and putting it back into a warrant article to fund the school's free, out-of-district tuitions. So that's what's taking place. Yes, it goes to the school department budget and can only be spent for that purpose. So that's what's going on with this article. Again, it's the no good deed goes unpunished approach where the state was making an advance payment and it wasn't clear to the district that was, had that restriction. And the other thing why it's puzzling is you can, under state law, prepay special ed tuitions. So had they known, they would have just done a prepayment in June, and it wouldn't have happened. So, yes, go ahead. No. Right. We're restoring money that was pulled out and putting it back in. That was pulled out by the state and putting it back in. So there's no net loss or net gain. And if it didn't happen, then the schools would be running a deficit of $400,000 in their circuit breaker account. Article 12 is the major article, $2.48 million for replacing portions of the McCarthy School roof. This goes on top of the 1.25 that was voted as to begin the design and scoping back in the capital budget. The McCarthy School, as you know, is our second largest school in town. It's got a huge roof. Again, in this case, it's 22 years old and needs replacement. This is going to get us to the areas of the roof that are leaking today. We've brought in engineers and design work and so forth. So what has to take place is the work has to be designed, and the goal is to do this work next summer. So we fund it now, do the procurement, award the contract after the first of the year, schedule the work, begin when school lets out around Juneteenth, and try to get it completed substantially before school gets back on September 1st. Next year, Labor Day's late, folks. It's actually, Labor Day's the 7th next year, so the goal is to be done by the 1st because we start before then. And this will get us a portion of the roof done. What's not included in this number, and you'll hear our Public Works Director, Christine Clancy, explain on Monday, it's only funding a portion. That's at the end of the useful life. Again, it has leaks. As you can see, we've had engineers doing work on these areas that document where the water standing is, where the roofs are, the leaks are coming in. And then the goal is to keep coming back in phases to do more sections of the roof to get full replacement. There is a state program that's called the Messy of the School Building Authority Accelerated Repair Program, although it's probably misnamed by accelerated. But it's a repair program where they generally will fund portions of these projects. The problem is, because of the backlog of projects and submittal by towns, they're not funding replacement roofs until 30 years at this point. Our roof is only around 25, and the other sections are 22. We're not going to make it that far, and that's why we're doing this at this point, because the leaks are there, and you don't want to start losing the situation there. As you can see, the goal is to get the schematic design completed, have the work performed next summer. You've got to remove and reset the HVAC equipment and your solar panels, but we also have changes. Again, this is a school that was built in 1959. It doesn't have today's energy code requirements, particularly in a community like Chelmsford that is a climate leader in terms of insulation and so forth. So you're replacing some sections that have 4 and 5 inches of insulation with 7 and 9 inches of insulation in order to meet the requirements. We're currently going through this with the South Row School roof replacement project. And so, as I said, we're going to have to come back to fund not only additional sections of the roof, but to also fund the solar panel replacements that go on top of those systems. So these are major costs. And again, we say, well, why not just fund it in its entirety? Well, our capital budget in its entirety is just over $6 million. I guess you could fund it in total capital, but then you can't ignore the rest of the town's infrastructure and vehicles and everything else while this is taking place. So this is why we do it in discrete chunks as part of the project. And so you can see in the slides I'm talking about, you have the existing roofs on the left, and then the proposed. You can see the difference in the insulation and barriers on the roof. And obviously you've got to support that because you have to, at the end of the day, you have to have a tapered roof that's flat, that drains. So these are complex projects for the community, and that's what we're seeking under this article, is to again keep going after the McCarthy School roof. And as I mentioned earlier, behind the McCarthy School will be the high school. And then we also have Harrington, and then as I mentioned in the earlier comment, there's also roofs on town buildings such as the police station that will need roof replacements. So as I mentioned earlier, as we look in the next 5+ years, the big thing you're going to be hearing from us are roof replacements and fire apparatus. This follows the work we've just done on school kitchens, if you've been with us in town meeting a few years, and elevators. We're now moving to the next segment of our buildings infrastructure. So that's what's taking place here. Yes?
Does the amount
No. I mean, yeah, everything, yeah, at this, if everything's approved, it would go to the, yeah, it would use all the free cash, yes. Yes, that basically it was what the balance was left over. We left it as the last article, and the reason I placed it last is if something didn't get approved, we would just roll that money into this article. And so that's what we're seeking to do. Yes. Yeah, our analysis is that it's more cost effective to the town to own and the solar panels than to lease them. Yes. All right, we then move to the last financial article, which is Article 13, which is $500,000 for drainage improvements on Westford Street. This is not from free cash. This is from the Sewer Enterprise Fund retained earnings. And the reason we're doing Westford Street is because Westford Street is currently closed because of the bridge replacement project over I-495. And the goal is to do approximately 650 linear feet of drainage between Worthing Street and 40 Westford Street to improve the drainage on the roadway as well as to remove inflow into our sewer system from sump pumps. So that's the goal here is to again, attack this issue at a time when the work can reasonably be done without impacting traffic and impacts while the bridge area of that roadway is closed. So that's what DPW is trying to do this spring. I think it's an illustrative drawing. It's not a real drawing. Right. Right. There will be new drainage things put in, and the goal is, again, we want road drainage and sump pump drainage to go into our catch basin system, not into our sewer system. And so that availability will help us because that was the whole issue is you want your roof drains and your sump pumps not tied into your sewer lines, but tied into your in fact, it also keeps the water in our watershed as opposed to sending it through a pipe that goes to the river in Lowell. So yes, that's what's taking place here. Article 14 is a non-financial article. This is to obtain town meeting authorization to renew the lease at 40 Vinyl Square, the municipal parking lot, for another 30-year period. In Vinyl Square, if you're familiar with the municipal lot across from Rosie's, we own a quarter-acre parcel that's a public parking area. In the back, the town has a 30-year lease of privately owned property that expires next spring, and that's what we're seeking to do. Is we need any agreement that the town enters more than 5 years for a lease needs town meeting approval. So this basically tries to show you this is Rosie's here. This is the lot that you see as you come through the center. It's this area in the magenta or maroon that's privately owned by this building here, and basically it's a no-cost lease. The town does snow removal and basic maintenance, and they allow people who visit Vinyl Square to park there. If we didn't have this lease, the property owner would basically post this area as no parking, private parking, limited to that thing. And again, parking is a constraint in Vinyl Square, and will continue to be when they redo this intersection project. Yes? Yes. Well, I'm talking, right, it's to authorize a lease. Yeah, so because, yeah, the lease expires. And so we technically will have to procure this lease. Yeah, and believe it or not, there is a state website that we have to put a notice in and basically explain why we're doing that location. So yes, we technically have to do that. So yes, it is a new lease, even though we use the word renew because it's at the end of the period. There is a new property owner. We've spoken to the new property owner. They're willing to enter into this new 30-year agreement. We now move on to what's the consent agenda and the zoning articles, and I'm going to turn the podium over to Chris LaValle, who has a presentation regarding the next dozen warrant articles and then additional zoning articles thereafter.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. All right. So my slides I'm going to be presenting today actually start on, if you have the handout, start on page 18 slides 36 through 57. Slide 58 is when my slides start. Slides 36 through 57 are all of the legal article terminology. So I just wanted to skip ahead to my presentation. So Articles 15 through 26 is the consent agenda. And while legally we split them up into multiple articles, we wanted to bundle them as a consent agenda because if one piece of this is voted down, all of it will essentially fail. So we didn't want to get into a situation where we're approving some pieces of it and not others, because that would create a really big legal mess for the town, and we would essentially need to pull everything anyway. So we wanted to create that consent agenda so we're voting on everything as a whole, and we're not wasting people's time voting on half of it and then having to pull it anyway. So why are we doing this? Well, there are a number of zoning conflicts in town that the NEMCOG organization that we work with has identified. And there are different ways to mitigate it. We can create overlays. We can look at different areas and create new zones. We can rezone properties. We can change the use table. We can do combinations of all of them. But looking at some of the zoning conflicts that we want to mitigate, we are realizing that creating a new zone will be the best option. And so we undertook an effort over quite a few months to look at a couple areas of town. Kate's Corner was the first one we looked at, to see how we might be able to reconfigure some of the zoning in town so that we can buffer some of the IA and residential zoning conflicts. That's really where a lot of our zoning conflicts are, is IA abutting residential, or IA in the middle of residential. So that's what we wanted to mitigate. Yes? So a lot of it is uses. So uses allowed in the IA zone, the industrial zone, are becoming a little bit more larger, a little bit more intrusive than some of the uses in the past. And what we're finding is that because there is a lot of IA industrial land that is undeveloped or needs to be redeveloped, we're seeing a lot of these potential conflicts where you have a high impact, negative impact use right up against some residential areas. We're seeing it in a number of different projects that are before the planning board, where residents are concerned about their neighborhood right in the middle of an IA zone. We also have a lot of residential that was built in IA industrial zones. Riverneck Road is a perfect example where a lot of that stretch of Riverneck is actually industrial, but you've got a ton of residential properties. So you've got those situations as well that we're looking to potentially mitigate. Yep, I'm going to be presenting that tonight. So let me get to the CB light. Commercial business is the CB, and we've kind of called it a CB light zone. We want to use this as a transition zone between the industrial IA zone and other zones like residential. We want to potentially, once it's created, apply it to a couple different areas. And as we were developing the zone, we used Kate's Corner as the model to make sure it worked in that area. We also looked unofficially at the Middlesex Street area to see if it would work there, and also Riverneck Road. So there are a lot of areas that we looked at to make sure that we weren't creating a new zone that didn't work in a number of different areas. But right now, this consent agenda is only addressing creating the zone, and then in a next article after that, it'll be applying it to the Kate's Corner area first. So as you'll notice, the changes that we're proposing are in a different order than what I'm going to be presenting it here. The order that is in the legal order is really about how the changes are applied. But it doesn't necessarily make sense, and it's not completely logical in terms of the flow of thought. So I wanted to present it in a different way to hopefully improve how it's thought of. And as I mentioned, once I hopefully pass this new zone, we'll then look at applying it to other areas like Kate's Corner this coming week as well. So the first thing, yes? So right now, our current zoning and industrial prohibits residential from being built within industrial. However, some of the overlays, the SEAD overlay, does allow multifamily in some cases. But in a lot of cases, if there already was a single-family home, it'll continue to be built. Even if the property sold, the house is torn down, a residential will continue to be built there. So there's no real prohibition because most of our residential properties are already built out. So the first thing we wanted to look at is our current manufacturing definitions. This one is the heavy manufacturing definition. We're not changing this. It is excluded in all zones in town. We do not allow it in any of our zones, but I did want to keep it in the presentation for reference. We currently have the light manufacturing definition, which is allowed in our industrial zone, and we wanted to take a look at this to see if this makes sense in the new zone that we are looking at. And what we're realizing is that even some of this manufacturing is a little bit more negatively impactful to residential areas than what we were thinking. So what we're proposing is a new ultralight manufacturing definition that we would use in this new zone. It includes indoor manufacturing of finished products and components. It's really about the intricate assembly. It's about prototyping. It's about the cottage industry, like small furniture manufacturing that might happen. It's more about the small trades type of manufacturing that you can see. It's also about 3D printing, boutique furniture manufacturing, small-scale manufacturing like that. So we wanted to separate that from the light manufacturing, which is even a little bit more heavy than that. In adding this definition, we also wanted to, yes? Yes, there is. Yep. Yep. So one of the things that we were very careful of in crafting this is we don't want to be overly specific. So we do want to allow some interpretation so that it lets the board and the developers evolve as the trades and as the industry evolves. So we didn't want to be overly specific because that does constrain. Yep. So hopefully it's in the whole totality of what we're doing. We're providing enough guidelines to allow for the intent that we're intending, but also to allow some flexibility. So part of it is by right usage, part of it is special permit, and we'll get to that down the road. So yeah, it's that way for a lot of the zoning bylaws. Some of it is interpretation, some of it is as much guidance as we can provide, and it often comes down to the zoning enforcement officer interpretation. And then it goes to the ZBA for appeals. So as we defined the ultralight manufacturing, we wanted to make sure that it aligned with the light manufacturing, and there were some things that we needed to clean up a bit in the light manufacturing. For example, the way that our examples were worded, it almost implied that paper manufacturing itself was allowed under light manufacturing, but we wanted to make sure that that was not allowed. If anyone has been in upstate Maine knows that is something we don't want to have in town. So what we did is we made some adjustments to the light manufacturing definition as well to align it with the new definition as well. Then we went into the use table. And what we tried to do here is look at, so up here you'll see RB, which is the residential. You'll see CA, which is, I believe, roadside commercial. CB is commercial, a little bit heavier commercial, and then IA. What we tried to do is all of these areas are areas that we see in some of the zoning conflict areas. So we wanted to take a look at the uses, see which uses are uses that would be beneficial to the town with as little detrimental impact as possible near residential. And so what we did is we essentially looked at each zone, took the most beneficial areas or the most beneficial uses, left out some of the more detrimental uses, and that's what we included in this new zone. Some of these you'll see are PB, which means that it's by special permit only by the planning board. Others are by right, and others are N, which is not allowed in that zone. Is it readable in the slides? Okay. So what I will do is I will work on getting larger handouts for town meeting. Is it legible in the FinCom book? I will do what I can to enlarge it on 8 by 11 sheets and make handouts available to people. Okay, so it is legible in the FinCom book? Okay. Thanks, Jim. There's no way it would take, it's a really long list of, so I tried getting it onto as few slides and as big as possible, but it would take 10, 12 slides just for the use table. It's a really long table. The other thing we looked at is accessory parking lots. It's the highlighted on slide 4, highlighted on slide 70, and then also highlighted on the next slide as well. What we wanted to do is, especially for these types of commercial uses, allow space for additional parking if needed onto a separate lot. A lot of these lots in these areas are very small, and so it doesn't necessarily allow enough parking for some of these businesses. So what we wanted to do is allow for the ability for a business to have a parking lot on an adjacent property lot. Right now it's prohibited, and it would only be allowed by special permit by the planning board. So we would only do it in rare cases. Yep. Yep. It is something that we want to encourage businesses to use some of these smaller lots, but we're not looking to expand massive properties. We would still have the same setbacks, we would still have, it wouldn't be used, it's definitely not by right, and it wouldn't be used very frequently. The other thing we wanted to add here is the ultralight manufacturing in the use table. So while we defined it in one of the prior articles, we have to add it into the use table here as well. We also had to add in a footnote where accessory parking lots are required to be either on the same lot or on another adjacent lot within 300 feet. So you couldn't have an accessory parking lot down the street or across the street too far. It has to be within 300 feet of the principal use. So we wanted to make sure that people weren't just plopping random parking lots all over town. Potentially, depends on the size of the lot. So could be a case where there are two tiny lots. There's maybe no reason to combine them, but you have the business on some, like 3/4 of one lot, but there's not enough parking, and we don't necessarily always want to provide waivers for parking. So in that case, they may need to use that second lot, the second property lot, in order to build enough parking. Because we do see it in town a lot of requests for waivers for the parking requirements, and that does potentially pose some problems in some projects. Or on another lot within 300 feet. So you can do either. We do have public parking in the town center, the town lot, but we don't want to have necessarily those as standalone private lots. Yes, yep, potentially, but we're trying to take it slow and see how things go, and then depending, we can always adjust. All right, so this is a blow-up of the use table. Again, because of the way the articles had to be written, we had to do these a little bit separately. So Articles 17 and 22 relate to the dimensional requirements. Here, it's related to the minimum setback, the width. So we wanted to try and mimic the CB, the commercial district, as much as possible in these dimensional setbacks. Slide 8, Article 18 is related to the SAOD overlay. Because the industrial areas that we're looking at often have the overlay, we wanted to make sure that this zoning was accounted for in the overlay. Again, looking at the dimensions, looking at the setbacks, we wanted to make sure that it mimicked the CB commercial district as much as possible. And then Article 20 and 21 are more housekeeping, where, again, we wanted to make sure that we had the property lines, the frontage accounted for in these zoning bylaws. Again, we mimic the CB district as well on these. Minor updates to the tables and the dimensions that you can see in the other areas. So that's the consent agenda. Yep. The CB light is the zone, and then the ultralight manufacturing.
Ultralight manufacturing would only be allowed in this new zone,
No.
or anything above it.
So the way, go back to, so it will be allowed in the CB light zone, it'll be allowed in the IA, and it will be special permit CB. The reason why is because light manufacturing is allowed in IA and by special permit in CB. So because ultralight manufacturing is a less impactful use, we wanted to mimic that in the other zones.
The CBLT, when it would be applied, would likely not be applied in anything other than what's currently IA. Is that a valid statement?
I can't promise that, but in all likelihood, potentially, yes, potentially, I think in Kate's Corner, there's a CB that we do change to CB light. Yeah. So in all likelihood, also because IA does not allow commercial uses, CB light does. The CB district has some things that are really nice to have from the IA zone, so we wanted to bring some of that together into the CB light zone.
And what's the process for how this new zone, CBLT,
Yes. So the next article is rezoning Kate's Corner properties. Yeah. So I'll go through the process briefly just so you can see it. But essentially, we would have, like we did with Kate's Corner, neighborhood meetings to talk through our proposal, get input. Then once we're comfortable that we have a good understanding of the neighborhood needs, we would open it up to a public hearing. We would go through the public hearing process, finalize the zoning like we did here, and then propose it at town meeting. Yep. All right. Yep. Yes, it is, and we'll get to that in the next article. Are there any other questions on the consent agenda? All right, so the next one is Kate's Corner. So again, we have the official bylaw language, and then we have my slides. So Kate's Corner. Again, we're looking at using this as a transition period or a transition zone. What we realized in Kate's Corner is that we really don't have room for an actual transition from IA to residential because there's only a few areas of IA within Kate's Corner area, and there's not enough room for transition. So what we did is we looked at, and here's a legend for you all. So RB is residential, low-density, single-family. CB is roadside commercial. CA is neighborhood commercial, and IA is limited industrial. I have some examples in there, what I could fit for you to see what those zones include. But this is the current zoning map of Kate's Corner. You will see, where's the laser on this guy? There. You'll see the old Maxwell's property here is CB. This is the Lockheed property building. This is the Lockheed parking lot. You'll see some residential properties here that are half CB, half RB. You'll see some public town-owned properties that are CB and IA. And you'll see a couple other areas over here that are a mix of areas. Part of the thing that we want to do with the zoning conflicts is also fix properties that are kind of split between two zones. It can be confusing, it can be problematic for some of these areas, And so we wanted to also fix that as we're working on this. Yes? Yeah. So this is Route 27 right here. This is Parkerville. This is the pond drive, and this is the pond, or the lake. Upper right. Yeah, Biom's up here. This is, as I said, the Maxwell property. This is the gas station down here. Hart Bond. Yeah, this is the current zoning map. Yep. And this is what we're proposing. And I will go through this. It's a little confusing with all of these. Yep. Yes, the colors are representative of the zones. If someone can think of a way, I'm all ears and I'm willing to do it. Oops. Zoning is a complicated issue, and I'm trying to simplify it as best as I can. Presenting is challenging. So ask as many questions as you want. I'm here to answer as much as I can or try and help walk through this. I presented it to the Select Board, FinCom. We've had multiple meetings on it at the Planning Board, public hearings.
So is it fair to say there's a lot of discussion about this, and a lot of revelation on this,
Yep.
and a lot of media out there?
I know, it's incredibly challenging to figure all this stuff out. So let me talk a little bit about process for getting here. When we started discussing applying this to Kate's Corner, we invited all of the neighbors to the planning board information sessions. We talked through our plans, talked through the CB light zone, changes that we wanted to make. And then we started talking about these specific properties and why we're thinking of changing things the way we wanted to. We got neighbors' input, made adjustments. I think there was a concern at the very beginning by most of the residents in Kate's Corner, but I think by the end of our information sessions and certainly by the end of our public hearing, most residents, if not all, were very comfortable with the changes. I think maybe one or two residents are a little still unsure, but I think all of them are pretty comfortable. Yes? We got input from Lockheed Martin. We did not get input from the other commercial areas, primarily because their properties are not really changing. We did get input from the Maxwell owners as well, because they were in the process of selling at the same time. All right. So all of the RB here, residential, remains the same. Nothing changes. The reason why you're seeing a lot of labels on properties like this is because they were in two different zones. And so we're trying to consolidate it into a single zone. So where you see the Ps, those are all town-owned properties. So we wanted to make sure that they were zoned as public.
Let me make a recommendation, just in terms of what we were just talking about, this education. Is there anything IA in here?
Nope. So the impact, so the benefit of IA going away is that if Lockheed Martin ever leaves, a warehouse, any of those high-impact uses allowed in IA would not be built. Yeah, directly across the street from Byam, right next to the pond. And so all of those high negative impact uses of IA can no longer be built if Lockheed Martin leaves. Yes. Yeah. Lockheed Martin is considered still the prototyping, manufacturing, high-tech type of manufacturing that we want to see in some areas of town. So we didn't impact their area. We improved the residential properties. We rezoned the public properties to be public. We improved the CA property here, and this stays CB down here. So we didn't impact the other commercial areas.
With the Lockheed Martin and their parking lot now, CBLT, does that mean they can expand into their parking lot?
They could before too.
They could before, because that was CB.
Yep. Any other questions on this? Yes, it is a designated public zone. Most of our town properties are P. I don't think I can actually, because this image is taken directly from our GIS, and because we don't have the ability to change the zoning within the GIS, it would be extremely. I tried and I couldn't figure out how to do it in PowerPoint. Yep. Yes, that's public zone. Yep. It actually is just town-owned public, only government-owned. Nope. Yes. This one? Yes. Yep. Yep. So this one, and this one go to CB Light.
And then the thing to the other side of Maxwell's convert to RB.
Yes, all of this is now RB.
And what was it before?
So if you look at this property right here, half of it's CB, half of it's RB.
So it helps clarify that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it really is just making the zoning map reflect what's actually on the ground.
So you mentioned that your software can't color it, but if this passes and you put this in the system, then it
Yes.
color.
Yeah, all of that changes on the GIS map. Yep. If we pass it next week. Well, other towns have similar types of zones, but this is unique to Chelmsford.
So the nomenclature is unique to
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. What I was more referring to that other towns have is the gradient of the manufacturing. So there are a couple things that the CB Light zone will do, especially in areas like this. So let's see, so for example, self-storage mini warehouses are allowed in IA by special permit and technically in CB. They are not allowed in CB Light. A warehouse is allowed by right in the industrial, by special permit in CB, but not allowed in CB Light. So what we tried to do is take some of the beneficial things that we see in CB that are not allowed in IA, brought those into this. We looked at the beneficial things in the IA and brought those into this, and kept the more detrimental things that are in CB and IA out. So in areas that directly abut residential areas, we feel that this is going to give the most benefit to the residential areas while minimizing the negative impacts. That's, well, they have their place in some of the IA areas, but not abutting residential areas. Not in Kate's Corner where the tractor trailer trucks would have a really hard time turning. Not on Riverneck Road where we've seen a warehouse have significant opposition. So another area that we were potentially looking at is Riverneck Road, where it is technically IA for most of the stretch of Riverneck, but is mostly residential properties. Another area that we were looking at is the Middlesex Mills across from the establishment. Though those mills over there are IA, so commercial businesses like a restaurant establishment, like a nail salon, they're not allowed in IA. So, nope, those are not allowed in IA, but they're allowed in CB directly across the street. So what we wanted to do is allow those in an area that makes sense. So converting all of those old mills to more commercial space, to more uses that are like restaurants, that would be allowed in the mills across the street from establishment. So there's a lot, and what I can do is I will highlight those as part of that handout that I will have for town meeting next week. But to make it easy, I will have handouts next week. Yep. Yeah.
I just wanted to explain, good evening, John Souza again. Just as a member of the planning board, I just wanted to explain one of the reasons that the Kate's Corner area in South Chelmsford came to our attention is that several months ago, you may have watched our meetings, a tree contractor brought a proposal in and was represented by his attorney and wanted to use the former Maxwell's, or many of you, if you've been in town many years, know it as Agway in the old days. And so they wanted to make like an outdoor contractor's yard with very heavy truck equipment, very large cranes that you would typically need to take down trees that are 80 or 100 feet tall. And so many of the residents in this area came to our meetings and spoke out against it. And the planning board actually listened, we very much, and we're interested in their concerns. We heard them. And ultimately, it's a majority voted against the special permit for that business. I won't name it, but you can look it up and you can watch a replay of that meeting. And so we tried to, I just wanted to kind of address some of the reasons why did the planning board first look at this area, and that's what really brought it to our focus. At the same time, we heard some of the concerns from residents as far as if nothing changed. It became clear to us just listening to people and listening to people in the business world that even though we all enjoyed Maxwell's as a garden center and the farmers market and all that, it became clear to us as a planning board that it was highly unlikely that another agricultural type of store was going to be able to survive in that neighborhood. And so it became clear to us that some other type of business was going to buy this property from Maxwell's, and it may or may not be something that the residents in that area would want in their neighborhood. So, Chris, many other members of the planning board, we wanted to try to be proactive and address this situation so that, a business that may have a negative impact would not buy that property, and then the residents would suffer with the impacts of it. As it stands today, if nothing else changes with the current zoning at Maxwell's, I believe a used car lot could also go there. So that's something, we're just trying to, respond to the concerns of that neighborhood.
Thanks, John. Unfortunately, there is not, which is one of the reasons why we were doing this in that area as well. Yeah, unfortunately, there isn't. When projects come before the planning board, it's really related to the traffic studies, which aren't always looking at the school areas as well. So, public, P. Yep. But P looks at all of the town-owned properties. All right, so I did have to help figure out which parcels are going to which. I had this table as well for you to look at. Yeah. All right, the next article, massage service establishment. So this came before the board because there was a massage therapist who was in a salon on one side of the street, was looking to move to the other side of the street that was not zoned for massage therapy. Yeah. This gets to the use table too. In looking at the zoning enforcement officer realized that our definition of massage and also the definition of massage therapist, Part D, were not aligned with the state definitions or the state regulations. In Part D, we reference the licensing of massage therapists by the Chelmsford Board of Health. The Board of Health does not license massage therapists. They're licensed by the state. So this is a house cleaning article to align our definition of massage with the state's definition, who also license the therapists, and making sure that we reference the state licensing as opposed to the Chelmsford Board of Health. We also are proposing to change the use table from special permit for this use to use by right, because it is a prevalent service in a lot of salons, and so we wanted to align it with industry practice with other nail salons that are by right as well. So. Yes. So we added it to the new zone in this article, and we also changed it from special permit to by right in all of the zones where it was already a special permit. Yes. So it's the commercial zones, oops. The commercial zones is really all it can be in. And it's by special permit only. So the reason why the difference is because on one side of the street, that property had a special permit for the license, the massage therapy. On the other side of the street, it was a regular nail salon that did not have a special permit yet. So she had to go before the board for that nail salon to allow massage therapists by special permit. No, it was the same zone. It was based on the property. The property, for some reason, a while ago had applied for a special permit and was granted it. And then across the street, they didn't have massage therapy in their salon yet, so they didn't have the special permit. So they did get the special permit eventually, but in the process, our zoning officer realized that our bylaw was outdated and needed to be updated. And we said, having a special permit for this typical salon service is kind of ridiculous and a lot of extra effort for business owners to go through. So that's why we're also proposing to change it by right. Correct. Yeah. Anywhere where there's a salon is the commercial districts, and that's where you can have these massage therapists. Nope. Nope. Commercial only. You can't have commercial, most commercial businesses you cannot have in IA. That's one of the reasons why we're creating that CB Light district. Yeah. Yeah. So housekeeping the definitions and then removing the special permit criteria. Any commercial district. We have 5 current commercial districts. If we add the CB Light, it'll be 6. So any of those commercial districts will allow it by right. All right, the next one. Article 29 is the definition of family. This was before us at the last town meeting. It was combined with another article. This time I separated it out. As was suggested at the last town meeting, we took a look at other towns. I do want to mention and stress that our current bylaw is unlawful. It does open us up to civil action and overturn decisions. I also want to point out, zoning regulates the use of the land. We're looking at zoning definitions for the purpose of zoning. We're not trying to change societal definitions of family. The current definition violates fair housing standards. It creates a burden to prove familial connections, and a zoning officer is going to have a very difficult time proving familial connections. It's not part of the zoning process. It could be a very intrusive process from a zoning perspective, so we really need to look at the current definition. I'll get to that in a minute. So it was also brought up at the last town meeting, how does enforcement work? So essentially, property owners are responsible for the first level of enforcement. However, most zoning also allows enforcement at the building permit, certificate of occupancy, where we also do the plan review and inspection. But beyond that, if someone suspects a violation, they call the zoning enforcement officer, and they come out and do an inspection, look at the certifications, and then make their determination. We also have building codes that regulate construction, fire safety, state sanitary codes that regulate the number of people who can occupy a unit based on the size, and state licensing laws. So we didn't want to recreate any of that in our bylaw because that's already taken care of by state regulations. So since the last town meeting, I did some research. I found that about 100 to 150 of the 351 municipalities in Massachusetts use the definition that we proposed last time, or something very similar. I have some examples up here as well. Some additional towns added some additional text to distinguish it from boarding houses. We don't have a lot of that here, so we didn't propose to add that. A few towns did keep the blood relative definition, but they also added the or and then the more neutral definition. So the zoning enforcement officer could use either or. The problem with that is that it's very confusing and a little bit more complicated. So we wanted to try and keep it as simple as possible.
Another way of reading this is saying a majority of municipalities in Massachusetts have a definition similar to our old one.
It's close to 50-50. I wouldn't say a majority because some of them are all over the map. But a lot of them, a big chunk of them use the standard definition.
So 50% are in violation, technical violation or definition violation. Why do we care?
Because it could open us up for civil action or overturn decisions. And we're trying to be proactive in avoiding additional litigation costs.
And if we kept the Carlisle definition, Cohen definition on, would that meet us better?
So,
How many towns have that kind of definition?
which language?
The last one, the Carlisle, Holden.
I found two. In addition to that, case law is, I'll jump ahead to this one. Case law highly recommends you avoid using the familial definition, avoid using kinship. You stick to the functional aspects, you stick to the single housekeeping unit, primarily because that is, by case law, aligned with fair housing standards. There is also, because of the new ADU law, there is much more scrutiny by the Attorney General's office on fair housing standards. So we want to make sure that just because towns haven't been caught up in this, doesn't mean they won't be in the near future as more ADUs come up. So, to address your point, we could change the use of the word family to household. The challenge with that is that that is a massive effort to go through all of the zoning and change multifamily, single family, to multi-household, single household. There are a lot of instances in our zoning where that happens. We would be here for many nights trying to change all of that zoning. Also, it's not industry standard. When you talk about multifamily housing, single-family housing, that's the industry standard definition. Multi-household, single household units are not really industry standard.
Definitions that were made, definition of family is understood.
Yep,
I'm just saying.
I know.
It's more to the point.
It was brought up as an option in the planning board, but looking at how many instances we have of that, it would also make bringing applicants in, a little bit more complicated. But it's still a household, to use that non-industry standard term, it's still a household with one person in it. But I think the thing is that we're trying to make it as flexible as possible while still conforming to the law. We could, I guess. It's wordsmithing. We had the legal counsel look at it. This is what we're proposing. Legal counsel recommended against that because zoning bylaws are for the purposes of zoning. Again, we tried to keep it as flexible as possible. It's distinguishing it from the transient nature of boarding houses. They're also looking at, it's looking at it from a unit perspective as opposed to individuals coming together. So we tried to do our best in going with the legal definition and as generic as we could. We could go back to the original proposal, I guess, but. Yep. So there are a couple issues where anytime that we have zoning bylaws passed, they have to go to the Attorney General's office for review. They do their review, and for some of these bylaws, like the ADU bylaw, it also goes through the, I'm going to butcher this, the Equal Opportunity Housing, I forget what the acronym is. But they're an office within the state that looks at equal opportunity housing. And they look at a lot of the new stuff coming out that looks at the ADUs. They look at whether or not towns are being discriminatory in their housing standards, in their bylaws. And so they're starting to review more and more of these as the focus on multifamilies and housing stock also becomes a little bit more of focus for the state. And so it could come to yet another zoning review down the road. We had it with the MBTA zoning. We had it with the ADU zoning, where those zoning bylaws had to go not only to the AG's office, but to this office as well to review to make sure that we were not being prejudicial against different types of families, different units. That's one reason why you'll see in another article where we cannot take school impact into account in our zoning, in our decisions, because they don't want towns to be biased against different groups, different protected groups, and different types of families. So a town that has a bylaw in it that does look at school impact could be used, doesn't mean we would, but it could be used to keep families out of town that have children. And it has been used in that way in the past. So the state is really starting to crack down on this. Yep. Thank you.
Can I just ask my question again?
Yep.
Or maybe summarize. The reason we're not removing family in this context is it's too much work.
It's going to be a lot of work, and it's not industry standard. Industry standard at this point, hopefully it will change because it is an issue that a lot of people have brought up, But industry standard at this point is multifamily, even with the state's new zoning and regulations, they use multifamily, single family. It's everywhere in zoning and development and all of those related industries. It would increase confusion in town. There's more scrutiny on all the towns in Massachusetts, not just ones like ours. Yes? Yeah, so this definition would allow that type of unit. Yeah. I think yes, and as I think it's about this, so it's not just living together, because any strangers could be living together, especially in a boarding house or a bed and breakfast, but it's really about the reason why they're there. And so it's these second and fourth bullet points that help separate it from a bed and breakfast where you have a lot of people living there, but it's not for the same purpose, it's temporary. All of this is going to be challenging, which is part of the thing going forward. It's going to be challenging. The more we subscribe and prescribe some of these details, the more challenging it is. But the idea is that you want to describe the functional aspects of the household, as opposed to just the living condition itself. And so that's what we tried to do in the updated definition, is that they aren't off in their own room doing their own cooking, and it's a one-room apartment, essentially. It's that you're using the common areas together, you're eating together, that type of shared arrangement. For the same reason this is coming to us the second time, it's hard to get agreement on this. Well, this technically isn't mandated. It's a strong recommendation that if we continue with our current definition, it opens us up for potential civil action and or reverse decisions. So if a decision on some zoning issue is made and there's an appearance that the family definition was a part of that decision, that decision could get overturned. Some of it's the same, and then we added. This is the definition we proposed last time. And this is the definition we're proposing this time. Similar, but slightly different. No, other codes and laws prevent that. That is actually regulated by the state sanitary code based on the unit size. Nope. They actually recommend we don't include that in our bylaws because it's already accounted for in the code, in other code. Building inspectors. And that's part of the building permits, certificate of occupancy, that type of thing. All right, moving on, Article 30. I mentioned this earlier. Another area where we were cautioned by the Attorney General to potentially a problematic area. The land court in multiple cases has found that it is unlawful for a special permit granting authority to consider school impacts when reviewing multifamily housing projects. Again, this opens us up for civil action and potential overturned decisions. if it's even mentioned in some of the board processes and decisions. So what we're proposing, because this was bundled with the family, it was hard to distinguish who opposed this one and who opposed the family one. So I'm bringing this one again as well, separate this time. And this one has not changed since the last town meeting. We're proposing striking in 195, 161, striking the term or the words "and need for additional school facilities," and then also adding the underlined parts of the second part. As much as we would like to, as much as we think we should, as much as it pains us to not be able to include this, we cannot. So it actually is a town service as defined, but it actually has to be excluded here. So the state actually recommends you can consider all town services except for the school services.
Question for maybe town manager or finance. Supporting.
In theory, but the state also had us do the ADUs and the MBTA zoning. I'm not sure we can at this point, but I will see what we can do. I also don't want to save the family definition for the last because then everyone's going to be exhausted. All right. The last one, ADUs. During the recent Attorney General review, they did approve our bylaw. In general, there were only two areas that they found problematic. All other parts of our bylaw, including the areas that were challenged by a Chelmsford resident, were approved by the Attorney General. The Attorney General took two actions. They deleted a few words in one, and then an entire paragraph section in another area. What we found out from town council and from the Attorney General's office is that when the Attorney General does strike out and remove text from our bylaws in that review, it automatically gets enacted that way. So we don't have to come back to town meeting to approve those changes. Those are automatically enacted. Those strike-throughs. So the deletion one, which is not up for the vote, but I wanted to show it here for reference, is they deleted 2 lots and principal dwellings. We consulted with town council. It's a legal, technical reason for deleting it. Most of us on the board couldn't figure out how it changed things. I still can't figure it out, but it was deleted. We don't have to vote on this. However, deletion 2 was a full section. And so what we ended up with is a full section missing in our bylaw. So we kind of have to do something with this. Replace it with something, do something, strike out the entire section. So town council worked with the Attorney General's office to look at what wording can we put in to replace this text that makes it similar to what we wanted to do with this text, but also be approved by the Attorney General. And so what I have here is our original paragraph that we had in there with additions and strike-throughs that the Attorney General and Town Council worked out to make it still say what we wanted it to say from the beginning, but be approved by the Attorney General's office. It essentially makes it very clear that the ADU will not be subject to special permit criteria and not be subjected to the special permit process and vote. Special permit vote requires a ultramajority. A regular vote requires a majority. So an ADU, if it goes through this process, would only require a majority. It does not require a special permit vote. And it cannot be held to the special permit criteria, which are a higher standard than a regular proposal. So that's what this new text does. So we're proposing through this article to essentially take this marked up, clean paragraph and reinsert it into that section. So it accomplishes what we initially accomplished by still allowing a process for non-conforming ADUs, but not have it allowed by special permit, or not having to go through the special permit process. Yep. Yeah, so our town council worked directly with the Attorney General's office to figure out that markup and addition. So it hasn't gone through the official Attorney General review because that comes after town meeting vote, but we do have the initial approval for this. A determination is essentially a vote or a decision by the board. So this isn't about the ADU itself, this is about a non-conforming ADU. Correct. And there are criteria and requirements for non-conformance in this section that we reference for all non-conforming regular projects.
In this case, what is the
Town council explained it. It's not a special permit and it's not a variance. It's essentially a new category of approval.
and is it those other sections?
Yeah, those are defining the process for the appeals. And that's why we needed it back in here.
There's an appeal, there is a process, it's not considered special permit.
Yeah, and the ZBA is still working through what that's looking like. They've only gone through one ADU appeal so far, and town council was present for that process as well.
It seemed to me this would be made much clearer if whatever that,
It is. It's very well defined. It's well defined in our code. We didn't want to duplicate that process in this section, so that's why we're referencing the other section. But essentially, it was making it clear in here that it was following that process without requiring the special permit criteria threshold and the vote. Any other questions? We mirrored what was in the CB district for those. Yep. Okay.
Okay, we're nearing the end of the review of the articles. We've got 3 remaining. First one is hopefully real clear. This is a general bylaw amendment, submitted by the Arts and Technology Education Fund Committee, and you can see what they're proposing is deleting the strike-through language. It's basically, what they're doing is removing the restrictions on when applications can be considered by the committee. So as you can see, now grant requests will be presented in a format specified by the committee. That's it. Whereas before, they could only be available from January to March of each year. So the committee felt that they wanted to open up the application process to any time during the course of the year. They only receive a handful of these applications, and I think that's why they wanted that type of flexibility. This program's, yeah, that's why it has to be, yeah, and anyway, so that's what's being done here, quite simple for this program. So that's that article. Article 33 is what's called a home rule petition, which is basically a request by the town meeting to authorize the select board to submit a petition to the legislature to enact a special law for the town of Chelmsford. And in this case, because basically that's the only way it can become effective, because we can't pass local bylaws that conflict with state law. And in this case, it has to do with prohibiting or restricting the use and application of second-generational anticoagulant rodenticides in the community. This was brought forward by Newhouse Wildlife and the Chelmsford wildlife organization that supports this to protect wildlife and community health. This model bylaw basically mirrors that's been already adopted by Barica and other communities. Derek Sohu will be here in the Save Chelmsford Wildlife. He'll present the article on a town meeting session. Again, these are poisons that are meant to address rodents. The problem, if you're not familiar with it, is these get eaten by the rodents, and then when the rodents leave the premises and get addressed by wildlife, the wildlife injects it and gets sick and or dies. And therefore, they want to prevent this from happening. We no longer use these type of products in town facilities. This article would enact a special law, if enacted by the legislature, to prevent their use anywhere in town. They're commercial products. There is legislation at the State House to enact this statewide, and this really serves two purposes. One would be to indicate to the legislature that towns and residents in Massachusetts support this, and two is if the legislature won't do it statewide, like they didn't do it the plastic bag ban or other such, remember they wouldn't, we also put restrictions on some containers that are used in restaurants and straws and so forth, that maybe they would adopt allow the towns to adopt this type of restriction. Again, it hasn't happened yet in another city or town, but that's what they're trying to do. So again, the slides illustrate what happens. The rodents get eaten, and then you're starting killing eagles and foxes and so forth. It is a real problem, and Jay Newhouse, who's behind this, has presented this. Yes. Yes. Well, there is no third generation at this point in time. If that comes, then we'll address it. And the reason they would use second generational is they're cost effective and they work. Yeah. Right. Right, but we don't know what technology will issue in the future, so all we can address is what's on the market today. So again, they'll walk through these slides. Again, what they're noting here is 91 of the 351 cities and towns are exploring these restrictions. 35 have reduced the use of these products. 18 have submitted HRP as home rule petition, so we'd be joining those 18, including the town of Barica, to protect wildlife, families, and the environment. Again, it doesn't ban the pest control, only this method of rodenticides with are really more safer solutions. Again, it has the benefit of protecting our wildlife, pets, and so forth. So that's the basis behind this article. And yes, Marjorie. Okay. The final article on the warrant, yes, go ahead, go ahead. They would be, I believe go back to the text of the bylaw, they would, we'd have to, if this gets adopted, we'd have to come back to town meeting to adopt a local bylaw that would set fines into effect. So what this does is, that's why the language is very specific and very brief, it would allow the town of Chelmsford, same thing with this pointer, may by bylaw prohibit or restrict the application within the town. So we'd have to come back to town meeting and adopt a bylaw that would have those penalties and sanctions. Because again, we cannot do it currently under state law. Yes? Yeah, but the problem is they get these things from commercial vendors and through the internet. Right, exactly, yeah, exactly, that's the problem. So it would prohibit the use, it would not prohibit the sale, it would prohibit the use. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, dispose of them, yeah, I imagine they would put forward a hazardous collection day and others would do that. Okay. The final article is Article 34. It's a citizen petition article. The petitioner is here this evening. He's having a representative speak to him on this article that recommends action to the Select Board and Conservation Commission.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, Paul's already started clicking through the slides. I'm Dave Dodge, 19 Chestnut Hill Road here in town. I'm representing the Friends of Coolest Farm, and we're trying to request town support to ensure that a portion of this property gets assigned for open family use, not just conservation land. That's kind of in summary where we are. You can read through the text. I'm not going to do that. I will highlight that the DPW and volunteers from town and the neighborhood spent a lot of time cleaning up the property that was an old farm. And it was in a beautiful shape at one point before to support open family use in a portion, only a small portion of the property. It's a large property. Family-friendly passive recreation areas, what we're hoping the town will support. It's a request. This is not a binding article. And here's a sketch of the areas that were cleared. This is open farm. Well, this was farmland before. Some of it had been open. It had overgrown. DPW and the Friends of Coolest got together and cleared several areas. And the plan is to put a bit more open areas on the left-hand side called the left field. You can see the yellow area there, and a little bit of area over here for open use as well. And you can see that it's just a small portion of the whole property, 4.3% or 4%, in that range is all we're asking for open use, not just conservation land going back to nature, to be maintained appropriately. And I'm not going to take any more of your time. Anyone got questions? Sure.
I think it would be useful, I don't know, you may be able to.
The agricultural land actually is across the road. This is really just the north part of across.
So either put this as pictures or do some real.
Good suggestion. We'll see what we can coordinate.
Or at least talk about it that way.
Okay. Added to the enclosure.
Just point that out.
It's a good suggestion, Kathy. Thank you.
Have them visually be able to talk.
Sure. Appreciate that. Sure.
Either in this or the article itself or
That's correct. The group,
in here, what is
yes, it's in the text. I skipped through the slides in the interest of time. You all can read that material. We'll talk through it on Monday for sure. Yeah, it may be Tuesday or whenever the second part of the town meeting is going to be. Sure, go ahead. It's soliciting town meeting and citizens in town to urge the town government to ensure that there's open use space that's family friendly on the property. A small part of it, 4% of what we invested in as townspeople. Thank you, Paul. Correct. The maintenance that was done by DPW was already, that effort was done, and the part that was being maintained was being maintained by neighborhood volunteers. So it didn't cost the town anything.
And if it's advisory and non-binding,
Why is it here? That's a good question. And I think that's where Paul and the select board were coming from in the discussions in the past on this that we've had with them.
is there something restricting the people can't use it?
I don't know how to answer that question. Not yet. It's in process. I'm going to go to the lady in green over here, please. She had her hand up first.
If this were to pass and the town chose to follow the recommendation of parcel,
That's the intent for the multi-use by family and groups as open space on the Coolest Farm, that 4% of the property. Got a question back there? I'll take a stab at it, and Phil and John, you can help me out if you disagree with what I say. It's supporting just what the lady in green asked. Scouts, any group that wants to have an open meeting, a family, a person walking their dog there, using the open space and the trails appropriately. Did I cover everything, John? It could be by reservation for large groups. That's our intent, but that's not specified as of right now.
We just started working on that this past year, so we haven't rolled it all out. And there's stones on the property that need to be removed. They could be removed because we're still working on the documentation for the CR. As I understand, Paul would be better able to articulate that. So we had to do a slow rollout. But passive recreation basically is what we're talking about. It's people going out and enjoying an open field. We're only talking about an acre and a half of a 54
54 or 55
acre parcel of land, just an acre and a half. That's why we didn't have a good, that's why we didn't include pictures, because you really need to see it. But the people that did use the site enjoyed it. Questions? Go ahead.
It's my understanding that the Friends of the Coolest and Conservation Commission were in discussions.
We came to an agreement on the left field. Okay, the dimensions, stone wall to stone wall on the left field, outside of the wetlands and outside of the buffer zone. It seems that the right field is not a priority for conservation. I hope I'm saying that very positive. I'm not trying to do any low stuff. So conservation's main concern is conservation. I mean, I think they're doing their job. But we as a community, the citizens, we're only asking for an acre and a half. Well, I don't even think it's an acre and a half, acre and a quarter. To be able to go sit and enjoy nature and keep it so it's family friendly, which means keeping it low, so tick-free as possible. And we managed to do that because of all the work that the DPW did last year. So we're trying to, I think if you're looking for a definition, if you're familiar with Red Wing Farm, we're trying to emulate what Red Wing Farmers is like that, and for the community. That's the best picture. Right now, if you look over at the fields, it's a lot of invasives. And we've had stargazing there too. Yep. A larger area. So you could get multiple people, multiple families, go out there and do that. It's an acre and a quarter, an acre and a half. We're not asking for the rest of the land. We couldn't maintain that much. I can't see who's talking.
It's lady back there. Yes. Not permanently, as Kathy said, but sure, you go out in a day, you set up your volleyball net, you set up a badminton net, families come along and they use it recreationally, like other areas in town. There aren't that many, though. We're lacking in that, considering how much conservation land.
But we had to. We did an amendment to further define some of the good questions that came out from the committees, and we sized down what we were looking for.
Maintain 2 defined areas shown in the diagram. That's the left field and the right field portion that was highlighted. So as I started out, this is a request. It's not binding. I think Paul, probably correctly so, is worried that this will spin out of control in discussion. And as petitioners, we realize that that could potentially happen. We're trying to get town meeting to have an opportunity to speak for the town citizens in each of the precincts of what they'd like to see as a portion of Coolest Farm used. Are there questions? Yes. Pine Hill Road. Oh.
What's the difference between how rules are written and why that's really maintained and why it's
So we're advocating for space, just like you're talking about. And I think the disagreement so far has been Conservation Commission, probably rightly so, is waiting until their CR is fully written and fully approved in some aspects, because that's what the property has to be held under by the money that it was bought with, is my understanding. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't even pretend to understand all of that. What we're trying to do is to try to advocate for the town to back not having this all treated as conservation land. Strictly, everything grows naturally, only maybe once a season clearing or whatever. Well, as the lady next to you said, if you leave something for only cut once a year, it's going to be meadow. And meadow begs ticks, and invasives grow in meadows and all that. So we're trying to come to an agreement with the Conservation Commission on what should be done. We're asking for town advocacy here and the town to speak up, which is what town meetings should be about, I believe. Pardon me? Yes,
Last year, when we cut it, there was grass group, DPW hydroseeded a small section road that they used a lot, but the rest of it was grass that came back up again.
Is it
No.
Just natural.
It's zero expense. We don't put anything into it. It's just volunteer effort. And the differences in the community, in the different sites, I guess you go to ask some townies that have been here, it's maintained in different ways and to everybody's benefit. But I can't address the differences. We're just dealing with coolest at this point in time. Sure.
So is, I don't know how the conservation restrictions work, but is there a risk that comes in?
You have to have certain legal words in the CR. And before the CR is, I mean, I'd ask Paul that, but he knows this cold turkey. But you need to define the usage ahead of time or do an allowance, Paul, for land usage?
I think that's a good question. I think that gets at part of what we've been working with the Conservation Commission on. How much wording, if any, can go in the conservation restriction to allow this to stay as maintained land? Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
Because the land was acquired through community preservation funds, which are state funded, we have to put a restriction on the land under state law. A restriction, and there's restrictions on Red Wing Farm, Sunny Meadow Farm. There will be one on this. The one on Warren Pole, even though that was acquired years ago, is still under review by the state. So it's a lengthy process. What the restrictions say is these are your allowed uses and these are your prohibited uses. And the reason for that is they're in perpetuity, meaning we don't know what the uses are going to be or the volunteers are going to be 50 years from now, 100 years from now, whenever. And so what the prescriptions, the restrictions are drafted to allow certain types or prohibit certain types of activities. Most of the prohibitions you can imagine are things that aren't controversial. You know, you can't mine it for, soil. You can't use it for any purpose other than open space purposes and so forth. And then the allowed uses sort of specify how the land can be used in accordance with where it was. So for example, it can be used for agriculture. So it could be used for community gardens. It could be used for these type of uses. That's the challenge that the commission is trying to draft. And I think what they're trying to do here is put the message to the Conservation Commission and then the select board, who ultimately signs off and sends it to the state for review, and then it comes back in an edited form, to make sure that those allowed uses would include these type of family-friendly uses. And that's where I think things stand today, if my understanding is
I
right.
think
So
that's a fair assessment.
I think that's what's taking place. Yes.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. You'll get another shot at me, most likely.
So again, that concludes everything this evening. Again, we'll be here Monday night at 7:30, starting with Article 1, and we'll go as far as we can before we recess at 11. Again, we'll avoid the bundle article of zoning if we get to it, which we hope we do that night, and then we'll come back on Thursday and hopefully finish on Thursday night with whatever's remaining to be taking place. Thank you and have a good evening, and don't hesitate to reach out between now and town meeting if you need more information.